The 6th of February every year marks the International Day of Zero Tolerance for Female Genital Mutilation, FGM. Female genital mutilation affects 200 million women, and that's globally, with dire consequences ranging from debilitating pain to childbirth complications and even death. Now, while most prevalent in Africa and the Middle East, FGM is a global problem and is also practiced in Asia and Latin America. Today, UN Women are recommitting to ensuring that laws are not only passed against the practice, but that government are taking action to implement those laws. And also educating us on this issue is Dr. Int'L Ekanem, a public health expert. He joins us virtually. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Ekanem.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the statistics. Looking at the fact that female genital mutilation is being affected by about 200 million women and girls worldwide. But in Nigeria, about 10% of that figure is prevalent in Nigeria. Why do we have such prevalence in this part of the world?
Well, of course, there are certain factors that can be associated with the prevalence of female genital mutilation. And of course, some of those factors have been clearly elucidated by the United Nations, UNICEF, and of course, UNFPA, who are directly involved in fighting FGM. One of such is Gential. It is believed that a child whose parent, whose mother in this regard, is at least has attended or has achieved a primary education is up to 30% less likely, to experience FGM. FGM is a barbaric culture in lots of communities, especially in Africa and some part of the Mediterranean and the Middle East region. And the only tool, one of the most important tools that can help to reduce this is education. Unfortunately, in Africa, education is quite low. I mean, with 20 million out of children, one would expect that we have over 20 million parents whose children are likely going to probably suffer from FGM. And so, apart from education, of course, there are cultural issues, there are religious issues that increases the likelihood of FGM. Some of these things can be addressed, and that's why we're saying, let us partner with the men and the boys and see how we can change some of those social and cultural norms, to female genital mutilation. So, in all, I would say that education and cultural shift is what we need, and that is the reason why there's much of FGM within this part of the world, because educationally we are disadvantaged compared to other parts of the world, like the Europe and of course the North American countries.
But let's all start by, looking at what FGM really is, because we know that a lot of people have given it different names and different definitions, which helps them to adapt to it and see it as a practice to go by. But looking at it from the medical, aspect or a professional point of view, what is FGM?
Well, FGM, in my own definition, is any harmful manipulation of the female genitalia, in the name of religion or culture, that leads to, in the short term, pain, that leads to infection, that leads to, the long term, of course, leads to sexual and reproductive issues, and of course, mental and of course, health complications. In female genital mutilation, a particular part of the female genitalia is targeted and is removed. Unfortunately, it is removed in a very, very hazardous way, and of course, because of the setting and of course the intent, the victims of this act actually come down with severe complications. And some of those complications would lead to long-term effects, which most unfortunately is the mental effect, because most people who experience female genital mutilation where part of the vagina is cut off. In such situations, the victim often carries almost throughout her life that psychological trauma. And this can affect influence productivity, can also influence judgment of such persons in the near future. So female genital mutilation is, for me, it's a barbaric, really barbaric activity. Though, like you said, some people give a cultural meaning to it, which is not substantiated anywhere in medical practice. And so it just to satisfy their ego. That is why this year we say, let us partner with the boys and the men. Because in most cases where there's FGM, you realize that it is the men, it is the boys. Sometimes, you see, it's not just about taking a particular aspect. That one is one aspect of FGM. You know, you see in some communities I've seen in the course of my practice where a grown-up man would force his hand into the genitalia of a woman and cause a lot of bleeding and leads to infections. And in one of the cases I know, the two little girls died of infection. So this is a very, very hazardous act, and we need to discourage it at all costs. And one way, like I mentioned earlier, we can actually address it is through proper education and, of course, through partnership with men and boys to ensure that they understand the negative effect that comes with FGM, and they encourage themselves, you know, to stay away from it and discourage other people from practicing it.
All right, doctor. You've really, expatiated more on this, especially with regards to bringing it to a common man's understanding and, of course, associating most of the causes, to education. You would agree with me that as barbaric as this may seem, this is an age-long tradition that is deeply entrenched, in the minds of people. Going frontally, to educate them, you would expect that some might resist this. This might meet some certain resistance or opposition, as it were. What do you think subtly we could do, or those in authorities could do, to be able to start educating these people and helping this advocacy to be well accepted?
Well, a very beautiful question. Of course, in countries like Guinea, Sudan, Ethiopia, and many other African countries, especially, there's been a very tough resistance. I mean, since 2012, when the United Nations started this advocacy intensely towards eliminating FGM in 2030. There has really been some resistance from these countries. But what we're doing now is that we are launching a strategic advocacy against FGM. We have identified some of the critical stakeholders, people that we know one way or the other influence what happens within the society, within the community. And these are the men and the boys. In fact, we have noticed that, in the last 10 years, we have achieved a lot working with men, partnering with men and boys. In fact, so far, over 5 million, girls have been protected from, FGM. We've achieved quite a lot of success in partnering with the key stakeholders. Who are the key stakeholders? In the community, we have religious leaders, we have cultural leaders, the traditional leaders, we have the youth leaders, we have the women leaders, we have the artisan group. So we identify all the stakeholders that in one way or the other influences the cultural practices and traditional policies within the communities. And we educate them on the dangers of FGM. We try to picture it in such a way that they understand not just the short-term effects, but the long-term consequences. Like I said earlier, they have, of course, an explanation to why they practice FGM. So what we are doing is to let them know that while we are practicing what you think is right, these are the long-term, consequences. These are the long-term demerits of what you are doing, and that the country is spending too much in treating cases of FGM. I mean, the World Health Organization estimated that every year, $1.4 billion is spent across these countries in addressing issues as regards FGM. So we put all of this side by side and tell them that look, the last chunk of our health budget goes into treatment of people victims of FGM. Now, if we are able to abandon this barbaric act, we will have more to cater for other services like immunization, surgery, and the rest of them. So we try as much as possible first to identify the stakeholders and then to engage them constructively, understand those we will partner with, so that we would send the right message to the right people that can influence the policies and practice in the right direction.
All right, Dr. Ekanem, I would like us to talk about the medicalization of FGM. But before we do that, let's touch on the types of FGM so that we can enlighten the public.
Okay, so we, like I mentioned earlier, we have different kinds of FGM, but I'm going to come down in a way that we can all understand. Like I mentioned, FGM is any harmful, practice that involves, hurting the female genitalia. I mean, we all know what the female genitalia is, the vagina of the woman. And it could be at birth, it could be later on in life, it could be even at an older age. In some communities, a particular part of the vagina, what we call the clitoris, in some communities is cut off. It is believed that when this is done, a woman would not have the urge for sex anymore, and that probably in some way will reduce the preponderance of prostitution and promiscuity among women, right? Unfortunately, what is not understood is that when this happens, apart from the mental trauma that it leaves in women, it also influences or affects their sexual and reproductive system. This is an abuse of the fundamental human rights of women, is an abuse of gender equality, is an abuse of social and behavioral rights of every human. This is one of them. The other one is sometimes even when these children this girl has grown up, some men are seen, mutilating the genitalia. Like in the case I mentioned to you, where a man puts in his fingers into the vagina of a 2-year-old child, a 1-year-old child, even children in months. This would, of course, lead to, damage of the genitalia, and this can lead to long-term effects, infections, pains, bleeding that can even lead to death. So there are different kinds of mutilation, female genital mutilation, but these are the common ones that we have reported in this part of the world.
All right, Doctor. We have to wrap up now, but let's finalize this by looking at what is being done by the to stop or curb the medicalization of this practice. Because if you have the medical practitioners getting their hands dirty and getting themselves involved in this practice, then it may be difficult to get it eradicated.
Well, the way we are doing it currently is through, like I said, through advocacy. A number of times, like I said, in Nigeria and many other countries, culture would have, rationalization for breakfast. So the thing that you know is not right, because of culture, you go ahead and do it. So like you mentioned, we see even some people within the medical profession that feel that, well, it is the right thing to do. So what we do is to continue to engage them, to educate them, to advocate. And that's why this year we're saying let us partner with the men and boys. Let us look at how those policies that are supporting FGM and look at how we can influence those policies in the right direction so that by 2030 we can achieve an end to FGM. So that means that we need to identify some stakeholders, which includes health practitioners. We need to educate them on the dangers of FGM, and we need to have them as ambassadors in the community to help us spread the message to other people. Rather than be a cause of FGM, let them be the tool to drive positive change with regards to FGM. So by the time we've done that, we can have a good number of persons who can help us drive the message forward. And I believe that with the current engagement now, like an organization somewhere in Guinea is doing currently, they are preaching, they are moving, in fact, they are even documenting. They track FGM cases, document them, and then use that to fashion out, strategies and recommendations on how to address FGM. So I believe that we can all work together, both the health professionals and the leaders in the community, to fight FGM and end it by 2030.
All right, doctor, just like my colleague once said, some doctors are alleged, to be into such practices, What my question to you would be, what are the laws, that could be put in place to incriminate people who are found in such dastard act, especially this kind of persons?
I can tell you that there are medical, in our medical ethics, whether you're a medical doctor, you're a pharmacist, you're a nurse, you all swear to an oath. And that oath is to protect at all costs the life and welfare of the patient. So if you're a doctor and you're found culpable in FGM, you are punishable. One of the things is that your license will be withdrawn. And second, you can be prosecuted. In fact, you will be prosecuted. And we've seen a few cases that happened a few cases that happened here in Lagos, where doctors made advances and, even without even touching it, but because they made advances, of course, they have been facing the strict disciplinary action. So anyone, any clinician, whether you're a doctor, you're a nurse, you're a pharmacist or whatever, and you are involved in female genital mutilation, whether it is an attempt or you have done it or you want to do it, if there is an evidence that you have the mind of doing it, then you will be punished accordingly. There's a disciplinary committee within the council that looks into such cases, and I can assure you that any doctor found committing female genital mutilation will definitely go in for it.
I'm wondering if there is a reporting system, because many of these are done, behind closed doors. And we know that even for those who are perpetrating the act, there isn't so much prosecution or consequences they're made to face, except for the case that was in the UK. We have the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, which of course has been domesticated in about 34 states in Nigeria. But how effective are these laws, especially in bringing to book the perpetrators of this heinous act?
Well, what I would say in that regard is that perhaps the question would be, how do we track these cases? Because like in Kenya, like in Guinea, like I told you, there is an organization there that tracks these cases. And what we have done in Nigeria so far is that we have certain guidelines. So if you are with a child, the mother must be there. If you are with a female child, the mother must be there. While you are examining the patient, the mother or the father or the guardian must be there. If you are handling, if it's a woman, if it's a female patient, most times we recommend female doctors to handle female patients. All right, and just these are some of the checks and balances that we put in place to ensure we limit the cases of FGM. And then in terms of of course, the policy, we have a number of policies. The problem in Nigeria is domestication and implementation of some of these policies against FGM. And I can tell you that in cases where we find people culpable, a clinician culpable of FGM, that clinician cannot go unpunished. We had a case in Lagos at the General Gosoya, and the doctor that I speak to you today is still serving, terms. So the thing is, it's one thing to track, because if we don't know about it, there's nothing we can do. Sometimes you see cases where the parents will drop the cases in court and say, no, I don't want to go into that because of our judicial system. I mean, you have to pay millions of naira to the lawyer to file a suit in court. It might be a problem. But if we are able to establish clearly that a clinician is involved in such, I can tell you for a fact that person will not go unpunished.
Doctor,
So
quickly.
What
about in a case where a physician, pressurizes a guardian who has his or her ward right there admitted, that such person is not allowed to stay, while treatment is on? Perhaps maybe the person is going to be admitted. What should such person do in such a situation?
Well, I think in that regard it's about the law. It's about what the people know. In Nigeria, the health education is very low. It's very low. So people don't even know what their health rights are, right? If one knows what the health rights are, you know that if a child, if a female child is being examined by a clinician, the parents must be there. So no matter what a clinician tells you, you know that you have to be there. What is the clinician going to do that the parents should not be there? This is not somebody that, the parent is the guardian, or the guardian or the parent has the right, the full right, in the law of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, to everything regarding the child, all right, the child of that parent. So a guardian or a parent should know that it is his or her constitutional right to be present whenever his ward or child is being examined.
All right, doctor, we have to just leave it there. Thank you so much for enlightening us on today's zero tolerance to female genital mutilation. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right, have a great day.